The other day, President Donald Trump questioned Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland by arguing that the fact they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean they own the land. His statement was part of a broader push to justify potential U.S. control over the island, framed as a national security necessity. Yet the comment sparked immediate criticism because of its historical irony. The United States itself exists because European explorers did claim ownership of vast territories simply by landing a boat on them. The most famous example is Christopher Columbus, whose arrival in 1492 initiated centuries of colonization, displacement, and violence against indigenous peoples. This video will examine Trump's statement in the context of that history, exploring how the logic he rejected in Greenland's mirrors the very logic that shaped the United States. According to multiple news reports, Trump argued that Denmark's century-old claim to Greenland was invalid because early Danish settlers merely landed a boat there, and that such an act did not establish legitimate ownership. He suggested that the United States could pursue control of Greenland the easy way or the hard way, implying that historical presence alone was insufficient to justify sovereignty. This argument challenges long-standing principles of international law, which recognize continuance, governance treaties, and historical occupation as foundations of territorial claims. But more importantly, Trump's statement inadvertently highlights a contradiction. The United States itself was founded on the very principle he dismissed. When Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, he did not discover empty land. Millions of indigenous people already lived across the Americas with complex societies, governments, and cultures. Yet, European powers invoked the doctrine of discovery, a legal and religious framework that declared Christian explorers had the right to claim any land not ruled by other Christians. Under this doctrine, landing a boat was treated as ownership. Indigenous sovereignty was ignored. European nations justified colonization, resource extraction, and territorial expansion. This logic was later embedded into the U.S. law. In the 1823 Supreme Court case, Johnson versus McIntosh, the court ruled that European discovery gave ultimate title to the land, reducing indigenous nations to occupants without full property rights. In other words, the United States legally affirmed that landing a boat did make Europeans the owner. Trump's Greenland comment is striking because it contradicts the very historical foundation of the United States. If landing a boat does not create ownership, then Columbus had no right to claim the Caribbean. Spain had no right to claim Mexico or the American Southwest. England had no right to claim the East Coast. The United States had no right to expand westward under manifest destiny. The entire colonial project and the subsequent formation of the United States relied on the idea that European arrival alone justified sovereignty. Trump's critique of Denmark's claim to Greenland, therefore, unintentionally critiques the historical actions of the United States and its European predecessors. Indigenous nations across Americas have long rejected the idea that European arrival granted ownership. Their histories emphasize stewardship of land rather than possession, sovereignty rooted in community culture and ancestral ties, treaties that were often broken or ignored by colonial powers, resistance to displacement, removal, and assimilation. From the time of people who first encountered Columbus to the hundreds of nations across North America, indigenous communities have consistently asserted that their lands were taken through force, deception, and legal manipulation, not legitimate ownership. Trump's statement, though not intended as such, echoes indigenous critiques of colonialism. Arrival is not ownership, presence is not sovereignty, and landing a boat does not erase the rights of the people already living there. Greenland is home to the Inuit, an indigenous people with deep cultural and historical ties to the land. Denmark's governance of Greenland has evolved over centuries, and today Greenland has extensive self-rule and its own parliament and growing autonomy. Trump's comment ignored this reality by framing Greenland as a strategic asset rather than a homeland. He repeated the colonial pattern, viewing indigenous land as territory to be acquired rather than a nation with its own rights and identity. Yet his critique of Denmark's historical claim inadvertently aligns with indigenous arguments that sovereignty cannot be established through mere arrival. Trump's statement that landing a boat does not create ownership was meant to challenge Denmark's claim to Greenland. Instead, it highlighted a profound historical truth. The United States exists because European powers claimed ownership of lands they did not inhabit, govern, or understand. The comparison to Columbus is not only appropriate, it is essential. Columbus's arrival marked the beginning of the colonial system that justified conquests through the very logic Trump rejected. His comment unintentionally exposes the contradictions at the heart of American history and invites a deeper conversation about sovereignty, indigenous rights, and the legacy of colonization. If landing a boat does not make one the owner, then the story of America must be re-examined through the lens, not only in Greenland, but across the entire continent.